Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is defense attorney Julia Jayne. Julia, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk about this case, which is over 35 years old, but has gotten renewed attention recently. Lyle and Erik Menendez are currently serving a life sentence after they were found guilty of killing both of their parents back in the 90s. And after public outcry and new evidence, the Los Angeles County DA said they are re-examining the case. First, as a defense attorney, what's your reaction to the news?
Well, I believe, especially in an election year, it's quite bold of George Gascón to publicly come out, make this statement. Of course, as a defense attorney, it's just the words that I'm sure they've been wanting to hear for so many years, that they're actually taking it seriously, going to review it. So it gives hope. For sure, as a defense attorney, if you hear that a district attorney is taking it seriously, making public comment about that, you know, the hope is that it leads in the direction that you want, of course.
And especially receiving the sentence, life without the possibility of parole, that is that glimmer of hope that you would be waiting for, sitting in jail for all those years. But I want to talk about the new evidence that has been regarding the case that has been discovered recently. A letter Erik Menendez allegedly wrote to a cousin 8 months before the murders that corroborated his sexual abuse claims. And one of the members of the boy band Menudo said Jose Menendez, the Menendez brothers' father, sexually assaulted him. So in your opinion, as a defense attorney, is that enough evidence to get the sentences vacated?
It certainly could be. First of all, we have the lens of the present day. And in terms, there's a lot more awareness, education about sexual assault and what impact that can have on someone's mental health. That in and of itself will be looked at through the lens of today. My understanding was also during at least the second trial, it was downplayed, or because there was no corroboration for their claims of sexual abuse. If there was a letter such as this, it actually provides, you use the word corroboration, precisely what the defense would have wanted in a trial, corroboration of these claims. Of course, the Menudo individuals' statement wouldn't have been available at that time, but it is nonetheless new evidence that can be considered. But the letter in and of itself, in my opinion, is corroboration of the claims they made throughout their trial. And that's significant, especially since the first trial was hung on manslaughter.
I want to talk about the lens of today versus in the 90s, because as we know, the Menendez parents, the couple, Kitty and Jose, were killed in 1989. The trial was in the 90s, and now looking at it 35 years later, people are seeing that in a new lens. There's a new light on this case. Can you talk about that and why you think, or if you think, that the trial today would have a different outcome or people would look at it differently opposed to when it was in the 90s?
Yes. I do believe that if the trial were held today and there were the claims of sexual abuse, in addition to corroboration, given so much that has happened in the last 30 years with respect to sexual abuse claims, whether it's in the church or other settings, that is given far greater weight, in my opinion, in today's climate than it was in the 80s and 90s. We know that the impact of sexual abuse, and especially in a self-defense claim, is significant. There's far more research, studies, and less stigma, I think, on those who have been the victims of sexual abuse. So it bears even more weight, I think, today than it did then. Not to say that at that time, that letter might have been exactly what they needed to corroborate their claims. However, as we know in the second trial, manslaughter was not even on the table. So that is part of the problem.
I do want to talk about or read you what the LA County District Attorney Gascón did say about this new evidence. He said, quote, "We have a moral and an ethical obligation to review what is being presented to us and make a determination based on a resentencing side." How precedented is this type of announcement?
That goes to maybe my first statement when you asked what's the most surprising, that somebody who is obviously labeled a progressive prosecutor, who has proudly announced how many individuals have been resentenced under his watch. I believe he said 300 with only 4 reoffending. That type of statement that they have an ethical and moral obligation is quite bold, but at the same time shows respect for his office. He does have an ethical and moral obligation, if somebody has been wrongfully convicted, to at least look into and pursue that. He's not making any promises about what they're going to do, but he has new evidence before him. And his office should take the responsibility of reviewing it, which is essentially what he's saying, without committing. Notably, he doesn't have to make that commitment until after the election.
Yeah, he definitely left that vague, but left the door open for possibility here. But since there is new evidence, since he did leave that door open, since there is a hearing next month, what do you think we can expect? Walk us through what's next.
Well, certainly, as the DA explained, there are two paths. They simply can take the position that the Menendez brothers can be resentenced based on essentially rehabilitation. Prior to even learning about this evidence, my understanding is that they have obtained college degrees, or at least one of them has. They've taken significant measures towards rehabilitation. They're in their 50s. That alone might be enough for the prosecution, for the district attorney's office, to say these individuals merit reconsideration of their sentence. Moreover, if they had been sentenced to manslaughter, they would have more than done the time that they would have been sentenced to. The other avenue is the habeas petition through the courts. And I think the district attorney's office will have a serious discussion internally whether they come out with a proposition for a new trial. That actually would be an easy route, because what they can say is a new trial with new charges of manslaughter. The defendants could actually agree to withdraw, if the conviction were vacated, they could agree to plead to manslaughter if that was one of the charges, and essentially their time would be served. That might be a route that's less controversial for the district attorney's office for them to take. I haven't heard that discussed, but I think it could be a possibility.
This was definitely one of those cases that, as we know, garnered national attention. And then they have a new wave of attention with the Netflix series Monsters Out. People from Kim Kardashian to the Menendez family have been calling for the brothers to get released. Does this public outcry work? Have you ever seen anything like this?
Yes, and it's slipping my mind at the moment, the other Netflix special about, and I apologize if I'm forgetting the name, it was a rape case, and I think that case brought, the Netflix series brought a lot of attention to the case, and he was ultimately released, resentenced, so it certainly can. And what we also see is not only media attention, but the family itself. Most of the family, anyway, I think they're having a press conference today, standing up and saying, we believe that these individuals have served their time. Enough is enough. They should be released. So it certainly doesn't hurt to have this series presented, that everybody's interested in this, although there might be a dispute about the accuracy and, you know, how pleased they are with the Netflix show. But it calls attention to it, and I think it can work in their favor, in the defendant's favor.
Well, there's certainly a lot to look out for, but as this situation does develop, I hope you can come back on and break it down with us. Julia Jayne, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.